I know it's unusually late for me to go live today, but I wanted to go through something that I kind of been wanting, I had in my head to do. When I first created the framework of the primary principles for our sort of ethical or moral code, I remember I did go through it kind of in my head, and I was comparing it to other systems of morality. Now, one of the primary systems that really is the basis for our legal systems is the Ten Commandments. And so I wanted to see if it was consistent with that. So I thought it would be fun to go through and talk about each of those in relation to the chart. Because when I created this chart, I did not create it from any basis in that. I created it from just understanding what are the primary principles and our primary ownership rights in our body, and how does that work. So what I thought I would do is run through that and see, is it consistent? Okay, because if something is consistent, if something is true, it's going to be consistent across the board. So let's run through what the Ten Commandments say, and let's see if they're consistent with this framework. Okay, I thought it would be a fun, just kind of a fun intellectual exercise. Okay, so when I actually went and pulled up a copy of it, right? So the first few of the Ten Commandments are all about somebody's individual relationship with God, versus this principle is really about our relationships with each other, right? So in the first few commandments, right, it says, I am the Lord your God, thou shalt have no other gods before me, don't make any idols or like graven images, and don't take the name of God in vain, and remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. So all of those of the first few of the Ten Commandments, those are all primarily talking about your relationship with God, right? And so that's kind of a little bit separate from what we're talking about here. What's the next one? The next one says, honor your father and mother. Hi, Mike. How's it going? Now, a lot of people take that to mean obey your father and mother, but it actually doesn't mean that at all. It says honor. What does it mean to honor somebody, right? It means to show them respect, to say nice things about them, to hold them in esteem, right? Not to tear them down, not to abuse them, basically. So that's what it means to honor. It doesn't say to obey. There is a verse in the Bible that says, children, obey your parents. But if you're no longer a child, you don't need to obey your parents anymore, right? Because if you're as long as you're a child, right? And some people grow out of being a child at a very young age, particularly if their parents are not very good. They have to become adults at a very young age, right? I left home at 16. I would say I, in many ways, became an adult in my mind and in my responsibilities when I was 12. So, you may become an adult at many different ages. There are some people who are still living at home with their parents and acting like children when they're much older, right? Then maybe they are still children. But the term to honor your parents, why would we honor them? Well, they gave us life. They gave us the gift of life. They may not be great parents. They may have done a lot of things wrong and made a lot of mistakes, but simply for giving us life, the gift of life, we can show them honor, which is just respect, to be nice to them, not to abuse them, okay? That's kind of the basis there, okay? And people have taken that to mean all kinds of other stuff that it doesn't mean. So that is consistent, right? Somebody, gives you the gift of life, be nice to them, okay? The next one says, thou shalt not murder. Don't murder, right? So, Michael says, honor the position they are in. Yes, so honor them for giving you life, right? That was their position. That was what the gift they gave you. And even if they did a lot of other bad stuff, you don't have to obey them. You don't have to follow them anymore. but you can still be nice to them. Okay, so, but the next one, don't murder. Okay, so obviously that's right here when we talk about the body. Actually, I should get the other chart. Let me grab the other chart, right? So this chart shows the law, right? This is how this framework applies to the law. And it says, right, if I have a property right in my body, then violating that property right, murder, assault, rape, all of those things are in violation of that property right in my body, right? So that is consistent. It says, don't commit adultery. What was adultery? Adultery was if people were married, they were having sex outside of their marriage. That's what adultery meant, okay? It did not mean single people having sex. It meant people who were married. Now, why would that be wrong? Because when people made a marriage contract, that was breach of contract, okay? This one here, this is the deal. When you made an agreement to be married, what you did is you said, I'm agreeing, I'm making a contract that I'm only going to be having sex with my spouse. So if you violated the terms of that contract, that's a breach of the deal. That's a breach of contract. Now, don't steal is the next one. Thou shalt not steal. Well, that's pretty clearly listed here under violation of our creations, right? Any kind of theft of any kind is listed under a violation of our creations. That's stealing. Don't bear false witness against your neighbor. Okay, what does that mean? A lot of people take it to mean don't ever lie. It actually doesn't say that. It says don't bear false witness. Why? If somebody was bearing false witness, right? If somebody was witnessing or speaking about something, it's like they were being a witness in court, right? So this is why we have laws against perjury or lying in court. So if you went into court and you said, I saw this guy commit this crime, okay? And you didn't see it, okay? And that's not what happened. Then what happens? The court may create a punishment on that person, violating them in a way that is not true. Oftentimes people, especially back in these biblical days, right, this was tribal, it was tribal time. So you'd be like, oh, you stole my sheep, okay? And then they would go and they would force that person to give back another sheep to the person who claims that they stole it. So if your neighbor said, yeah, I saw him steal that sheep, right? And then this other person is forced to give over one of their sheep and they didn't actually steal the sheep, they didn't commit the crime, right? That's violating their property. Anytime they were in a situation where someone was bearing witness, it was a legal court case of some sort, right? In which the person who that other neighbor was lying about would end up with some kind of punishment. That punishment would end up being either taking away their property, taking away their liberty, taking away their life. All of those are their primary rights to hold unless they've actually created a violation. So that's what bearing false witness meant. It didn't mean just lying about something. It didn't mean saying, hey, you look good when you actually look like shit, right? Or it didn't mean saying, no, that dress doesn't make you look fat, okay? And it was not that. It was actually about telling a lie about somebody in such a way in which they then lost some of their property or their liberty based on that lie that you told. And it was typically in court. That's what it meant to bear false witness. The other ones are don't covet, right? Don't envy, don't want to take away your neighbor's house, their wife, their animals, or anything that belongs to your neighbor, right? That's really just all about, stealing. That's all about theft, right? Don't try to go and, right, take away your neighbor's wife, right? That's basically wanting them to breach their contract. See, that's trying to get someone to breach their contract of their marriage contract, right? Coveting was that bit that started inside where you wanted or you were envious or coveted your neighbor's things, right? Why? Because that was going to generate First begins the thought, right? Then the emotion, and then the action. So it's saying don't even go down that road of wanting to try to take something away that belongs to somebody else. Don't even start down that road. Don't start down that in your thoughts, because you're going to end up there in your actions. So in that sense, all of those are in fact completely consistent with this framework. So anyway, I just want to run down that list with you, right? So all of those things that were being talked about were property rights issues. See? Hey, Raphael. All of that stuff is a property rights issue. And all of these 10 commandments, other than the first ones, which were dealing with somebody's individual relationship with God, were all about property rights and violation of property rights, and are consistent with the principles in this framework. And the principles of this framework are the principles that underlie everything that we consider the law, everything we consider the moral law. They are all these principles, right? This underlies everything. And this is not true only in Western countries. This is true in countries all over the world, right? Stealing is a crime in China, just like it's a crime in the US, just like it's a crime in Indonesia, right? Murder, the same. Rape, the same, right? Whether or not they enforce it, whether or not their governments engage in those crimes and then try to say or pretend that that is okay, that doesn't change the fact that these underlying principles we all recognize as wrong, and that they are the principles that underlie our legal systems all over the world, right? Because these are the foundational principles of humanity. They are foundational moral code principles. So I just thought that might be interesting for some people to have a little run through of, what we consider the 10 commandments, and see, is it consistent with this framework? Even though this framework was not based on it, was based on the concept beginning from property rights in our body, but it is consistent with the other foundational, moral laws that we know as humans. So anyway, I thought that might be fun for everyone. Mike says the problem is when we violate them as agents of government or job. Yes, right, that does become a problem. That's a big problem, is when our governments violate these principles against us, or when we choose to violate them saying, well, my government made me do it, or this is part of my job, right? And we use some kind of excuse to violate these things and to say, well, this isn't a moral issue anymore, right? This is the same thing that happened in the cult, where people said, I'm giving over my responsibility, right? I'm just obeying what my leaders say, what the cult leader says, what God says, right, through the cult leader or whatever, right? And that when people try to give over their moral responsibility for their actions and say, well, I'm doing it just because my leader said, and therefore I don't have any responsibility, or therefore, if my leader thinks it's right, then it's right, right? Obviously, that is a fallacy, and that cannot be true, okay? Because if you murder somebody because somebody else tells you to, right, that's still murder. You're still responsible. So violations of any of these principles, even if done on behest of someone that you consider a leader or respect, is still a violation, right? And you, as the individual, still bear the moral responsibility for that violation. And that is something that we all need to take very seriously. All right, because it wasn't, if your leader tells you to, then it's okay. It said, don't do it. Okay, why? Because these foundational things are the principles that they come before the law. These are the foundational principles that the law, right, the law that we have on the legal books was built on. But the principles come before it, right? The law is just a codification of it. And we run into a lot of trouble when we allow people to write laws that violate these principles. That creates a lot of problems for all of us. So anyway, that was a little rundown on the law for you. So have a beautiful Sunday, and I will see you tomorrow, Monday morning. Bye.